And I think we might see some of that.
I think it's possible, but in this series, we have seen those vastly unfavorable decks picking up those wins.
That's right.
A lot of big upsets here, I would argue, in part due to maybe the draws not going a particular way, but also both of these players here had very different options that potentially they made the wrong choices.
Yeah. So now we have a Mallygaggle mirror, if you will. And that name is very clever for several reasons. There's actually layers to that joke. I'm going to let you guys unpack that for yourselves.
That was a little gift. That one's free.
It was. That one's free. The first one is always free. That's my rule. Talk to me about this matchup. You said you've played a lot of Malygos Druid, and have you run into this mirror specifically? And more importantly, as a targeted question, have you run into the Azalina Soul Thief shenanigans that happens when both players have multiple hands?
I have. It gets intensely complicated very, very quickly. I've been playing mostly just Malygos or just Togwaggle Druid, rather than the hybrid version that we see here. But it is an intensely difficult matchup to play. There are so many different strategies that you can go for, and adding in the Togwaggle inevitability as well just only complicates the matter further. But one thing I do know is that if there is one player I could choose to not go up against in this mirror in the entire world, it would be Hunterace. But if I could draw Wild Growth, Twig, and Nourish on both sides, I would also choose to do that.
I mean, it's so interesting based off the way hand sizes play out. First of all, of course you want to draw your deck and ramp up. This is almost all just a formality in the early stages.
Yeah.
What starts to get more complicated is when you switch decks with opponents. So is Azalina, Soul Thief, and King Togwaggle even relevant if both players are even, because you're about the same depth of, you know, you're basically drawing the same amount of cards, and you both hit fatigue, so it doesn't even really matter at that point. So then are you just trying to save Florist for perhaps the Malygos? But then if you have Azalina, you kind of weaken your own hand if you're dumping everything and your opponent's dumping as well. Yeah. There's a lot of nuance to it.
There's so much nuance in this matchup, and I think one of the core aspects to look at this game is how many cards are being drawn. Because when you are playing a Togwaggle Druid mirror, you want to draw a lot of cards. You want to get through to making your deck as small as possible, then you switch with your opponent and hope that you win in fatigue. Whereas in the Malygos Druid mirror, you don't want to draw that many cards. You want to be armoring up with your branching parts, getting out of range of damage, and trying to fatigue your opponent later on after they've exhausted their Malygos combo.
That's right.
So when you have both win conditions available to both players, how on earth do you sift through all that information and find a winning line?
Right, and both players have their ultimate infestation. The big thing that I want to say, though, is that Hunterace sticking this mind control tech might actually be a hidden MVP. In fatigue scenarios, specifically Druid mirrors, having a little extra life gain often can be the difference maker, especially if you're the one attacking, too. Hunterace clearly had the initiative. He ramped up, had that coin, but was still able to capitalize it. He's pushing just a little bit extra damage every single turn. Silver's going to work in a fatigue scenario where he's down a lot of life, and that puts him a few extra turns where he has to be a little bit more aggressive, and that might play directly into Hunterace's hand.
And like you said, I've got to be honest, I was kind of glossing over this mind control tech, but it will already have done 6 damage, I believe, at this point. Which, 6 damage, that's just another Malygos Moonfire you've created out of nowhere that Silvors does not have.
Yeah, assuming it gets to that point. Malfurion the Passionate as well on both sides. So, you know.
Again, one of the most important cards in the matchup. Both players have the nuts.
The ability to jail out your opponent from pressuring your life total is really important here. And then one thing to consider as well is that neither player can really attack with their heroes unless they're ready to commit. I like this play too from Hunterace, overdrawing. You know, Naturalize can burn a really important card. Malygos. But, I mean, there's still Azalina combos, so you can copy your opponent's hand and do all this stuff with Malygos, but you still can always just borrow your opponent's hand.
So now for Hunterace, I have to imagine his game plan becomes a little bit simpler. With one of those win conditions shut off, he probably just starts drawing through his deck as quick as he can, because he just wants to make sure his opponent can't be too far ahead on fatigue and go for the Malygos win condition. But what he also wants to do now is start putting a lot of damage through the face. Because if Silvors tries to go for the the Togwaggle win condition now by drawing through his whole deck, that means that Hunter Ace can maybe force him to not use branching paths for armor anymore and push for some damage and get a lethal with a Malagos of his own.
That's right. The saving grace here for Silvers is if he draws the entire deck, still has Azalina and Togwaggle, then he's actually still very similar position, except he just lacks a little bit of the burst. However, Hunter Ace can navigate through that by playing Malagos aggressively and then just swapping it back. So yeah, so this is kind of the dance that we have, if you will. If it ends up getting to that point.
And Hunter Ace here, pretty obvious what his game plan is. You just keep drawing for the moment. This hand doesn't do enough quite yet.
Right.
He doesn't even want to swap decks yet because they are of equal size, so he would just give his opponent a better deck at that point because there's the Malagos on his deck, but not in his opponent's.
Yeah, and then there is, of course, hand space issues to consider on Hunter Ace's side. Just like he naturalized Silvers, he can also get naturalized himself.
Yep. And again, coming back to the key aspect here that I was talking about of this matchup of whether or not you draw cards, how many cards you draw, I think Hunter Ace has pretty much got it exactly right. He's just drawing cards now that he needs to because he doesn't need to fatigue a Malagos win condition.
Right.
Still gaining the armor every turn because he realizes even with Malagos gone out of the way, this still goes to fatigue pretty much every time because they're both trying to draw through their whole deck now. And so every single extra point of armor he can gain, so crucial.
Don't think he needs to hold onto the Spellstone. The big removal target is Malagos. I do like this as well, just because
what else
spiders themselves represent.
Oh my god! No way!
That is 2 win conditions down.
That's insane! This is how you win two tour stops, man. You also happen to be the best player in the world, but this helps.
Yes. Oh man, this is a huge ditch for Silver to dig himself out of.
A tangled web.
Yeah, no kidding.
You said it, Malfurion.
I don't even know how to win if I'm Silvers at this point, because
it's Azalina, right? You steal your opponent's Togwaggle and hope to win that way.
Right. So then does Hunter Ace have to dump his hand in order to avoid that?
Oh man, it's so complicated. If he can go for Azalina and Togwaggle, well, he can do it next turn, right? He could just go switch the decks, because even though he has more cards than his opponent, maybe he's thinking your deck just doesn't do anything. But then actually no, he's giving his opponent the good deck then. He's giving his opponent Malagos.
He's hoping that it discounts the Azalina. Actually, you can just play Dream Petal Florist again.
But if the Azalina had been discounted there, Hunter Ace, while he may not have known it, could have gone for Azalina double naturalize, Azalina naturalize. He could have milled so many cards from his opponent.
That's true.
But then he would have obviously given up his Togwaggle win condition then.
So Hunter Ace still has that Azalina Togwaggle, but he hasn't drawn his own Malagos, so he gives him the win condition. This is still a very tenuous situation here for Hunter Ace. But in the end, I think Hunter Ace still has the final say, and he has the life.
I agree. I think he's definitely ahead.
Like, what if he just swipes and just tanks up, if you will, and then Silvers has to... the burden's on him to make a proactive play here.
I'm almost wondering if he leaves up the Dream Petal Florist, because he'll end up stealing his opponent's hand anyway. So maybe he wants to make it better for when he inevitably goes for stealing his opponent's hand. Because if his opponent gets a 0-mana Azalina, that's pretty good for Hunter Ace, right? He can just go a load of naturalizers in one turn. Sure. I agree that's kind of playing with fire. When you're ahead, you just want to take the simple routes where it's less difficult for variants and random stuff to happen. And here it is, the Dream Petal Florist just going for the reduction on the Azalina Soul Thief. And all kind of alarm bells have to be ringing for Hunter Ace. Now, what else could that card be in his hand? With Togwaggle and Malagos gone, those are the only 3 cards you want to reduce. It has to be Azalina now.
Yes. And now does Hunter Ace have to hold on to his hand because he doesn't want to discount stuff?
So if he plays Azalina here, Togwaggle leaves the game. It's no longer a factor in this match.
Right.
Which maybe works in his favor if he thinks he's in a better position because he has more cards in deck and there'd be no deck swapping from there on in.
That's right.
He could steal 2 naturalizers from his opponent and go for them right away.
Yeah, because Silver's getting his own Togwaggle means that both players would just end up swapping decks. But what's important is how cheap it is, because if this deck swap does happen, Silver has an opportunity to steal his opponent's Malagos from the deck. You can swap it, draw cards, and then you still have relevance. But Silver's would then be down in fatigue, so that is definitely a downside.
And I've got to be honest.
You see something, Derek?
Oh, no.
Derek rubbed his hands together. He's getting hyped, man.
I feel like Azalina, I trust that Hunter Ace knows this deck better than I do. I'm not even coming close to saying I know it better. But if you had gone Azalina there, your deck is vastly better than your opponent's at the moment for Hunter Ace.
Right.
He has more cards in there and the Malagos. Getting rid of the Moonfires is kind of sad. But if he had gone for the Azalina, he could have then gone for double Naturalize and still left it on his turn ending with no Naturalizers in hand. And it looks like finally he's seeing that line. He just wants to play the Azalina because his deck is better. He doesn't have to swap.
Yeah, this is excellent recognition here from Hunter Ace, and now using Naturalize, and he can keep on going.
But he needs to be real careful here because if he ends the turn with Naturalizers in his hand, Silvors can burn him for...
He has a twig.
20 cards. Oh, he breaks the twig. He mulligans his opponent like 20 cards here.
Yeah, he can keep this train going.
That's just GG.
This is GG. This is an infinite train of damage. Not literally infinite, but it might as well be because he can keep dumping his hand, keep playing free Azalinas. Hunter Ace has crafted the perfect scenario to drain Silvers of his remaining cards and kill him with fatigue with his own cards. Stop hitting yourself.
This is the stop hitting yourself deck of Hearthstone, isn't it? But just what stellar play from Hunter Ace here. He knew the only card his opponent would reduce with Dream Petal is Azalina, so he copied that. Hits like 5-6 naturalizers a turn. There is nothing that Silvors can do here.
You win. I can rest now.
Druid can play Malagos, Druid can play Togwaggle, Druid can play Spiteful, Token. It can play aggro, mid-range control in combo. And it also can play APM Druid. That's right, add another archetype to the list. Hunter Ace completes the comeback and wins 3-2 and improves the score to 3-0 undefeated. As you can just look at the drama. Hunter Ace was so relieved by that series, and what a pleasure it was to bring to you guys that best of 5. And I feel like, man, if this is what is in store for all the mirrors that we have in today, I can't wait to see how the rest of the field shapes up, Derek. It's been an excellent ride so far.
This is just why I love competitive Hearthstone. It is watching the most difficult decks being piloted by the best players in the world at them. He basically, if not invented this deck, popularized it, made it available to the masses by kind of cracking the code and figuring out how to play it so optimally.